Healing is neither forgetting nor avoiding. The desire for closure often masks a deeper emotional truth. We're not seeking resolution, we're avoiding grief. We want the story to make sense so we don't have to feel the ache of its ending. We want the person to explain themselves so we don't have to confront the silence they left behind. Carl Jung taught that the psyche resists pain not because it's weak, but because it fears fragmentation. Unprocessed grief threatens the illusion of wholeness. So instead of mourning, we intellectualize. We search for reasons. We chase clarity. We wait for closure. But grief is not a problem to solve. It's a process to surrender, and a closure is not a prerequisite for healing. It's often a distraction from it. The loop that keeps you stuck. Psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik discovered that the brain fixates on incomplete experiences more than resolved ones, a phenomenon now known as the Zeigarnik effect. The psychological tendency to remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. This explains why you replay conversations, reread messages, and obsess over what was left unsaid. Your mind is trying to close a loop that was emotionally interrupted. But the loop isn't just cognitive, it's relational. It's the part of you that still believes resolution will restore emotional equilibrium. Yet Jung would argue that the psyche doesn't need the loop to close externally. It needs the emotional energy to be metabolized internally. That means facing the discomfort, not bypassing it with imagined endings. The loop breaks not when the story is complete, but when you stop needing it to be. The longer you wait, the further you drift. Waiting for closure is a form of emotional suspension. You put your healing on hold. You tether your worth to someone else's awareness. You postpone your liberation for a conversation that may never come. Fromm, a German-American social psychologist, warned against this kind of emotional dependency. He believed that love becomes distorted when it's rooted in validation-seeking rather than self-affirmation. When you wait for someone else to acknowledge your pain, you give them power over your healing. This is not love. It's emotional outsourcing. And the longer you wait, the more disconnected you become, not just from them, but from yourself. You don't need their words, you need your own. The fantasy of closure is built on the belief that someone else's words will make your pain legitimate. But legitimacy doesn't come from external validation. It comes from internal recognition. Jung emphasized the importance of individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole by integrating all parts of the self, including the wounded ones. This means giving voice to your own pain, even if no one else acknowledges it. You don't need their apology to grieve. You don't need their explanation to understand. You don't need their permission to heal. You need your own truth, spoken, written, felt, and honored. Forgetting versus real resolution. Closure implies finality. Integration implies continuity. Jung rejected the idea of emotional erasure. He believed that every experience, especially painful ones, must be absorbed into the psyche to create wholeness. This is the difference between forgetting and transforming. Closure seeks to end the story. Integration seeks to understand it. When you integrate, you ask, what did this relationship reveal about my unconscious patterns? What projections did I place on this person? What parts of me were activated, suppressed, or distorted? This is not about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming authorship of your emotional life. The shadow wants you to keep searching. The shadow, Jung's term for the unconscious parts of the psyche we reject, thrives in ambiguity. It feeds on unresolved emotions, unspoken truths, and unmet needs. When you chase closure, you're often avoiding the shadow. You're refusing to look at the part of you that still believes you deserve the pain. The part that feels unworthy without their attention. The part that equates abandonment with identity. But the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It governs your choices. It repeats your patterns. It attracts relationships that mirror your wounds. To stop chasing closure, you must confront the shadow. You must ask, what am I really afraid to feel? And then feel it. The body remembers what the mind avoids. Neuroscience shows that emotional trauma is stored in the body, particularly in the limbic system and vagus nerve. This is why heartbreak feels physical, why silence feels suffocating, why absence feels like danger. Your nervous system doesn't care about logic. It cares about safety. and unresolved emotional experiences register as threat. This is why you feel tightness in your chest, restlessness in your limbs, obsession in your thoughts, numbness in your emotions. You're not broken, you're dysregulated. And healing requires more than understanding. It requires somatic release, breath work, movement, ritual, and nervous system repair. The fantasy is keeping you bound. You imagine the final conversation. They sit across from you. They finally understand. They finally say what you needed to hear. And in that fantasy, you feel peace. But peace built on someone else's awareness is fragile. It's conditional. It's borrowed. Even if they gave you the perfect apology, it wouldn't restore the nights you cried alone. It wouldn't return the version of you that disappeared in their presence. Because closure isn't a conversation. It's a confrontation with yourself. You're mourning more than a person. You're not just grieving the relationship. You're grieving the version of yourself that felt alive in their presence. The fantasy of what could have been. The emotional safety you thought you found. The identity you built around being chosen. This is what Jung called the death of the false self. The persona constructed to survive in relationships that required self-erasure. And mourning that self is painful. But it's also sacred. Because it clears the space for the real you to emerge. Closure is a choice, not a gift. You don't need someone else to close the door. You can walk through it yourself. This is the essence of emotional sovereignty, the ability to choose healing without permission. Fromm believed that emotional maturity begins when we stop waiting to be loved and start loving ourselves. Not as a consolation prize, but as a reclamation. Closure is not something you receive. It's something you create through boundaries, truth, and ritual. You don't need to forget, you need to reclaim. Letting go isn't about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming your place in the present. It's about saying, I remember what happened, and I choose to grow from it. I honor my pain, and I no longer let it define me. I release the fantasy, and I return to myself. This is not forgetting. It's remembering who you were before the silence, and who you're becoming now that you've stopped waiting. Begin reclaiming yourself. If this video stirs something in you, please subscribe our channel. If you're ready to stop waiting and start healing, then begin. The 30 Days to Authentic Love and Emotional Liberation program is your guided path to integration, regulation, and emotional sovereignty. It isn't a quick fix but a psychological initiation, a daily unraveling of illusion, a reclamation of emotional truth, and a return to wholeness. This is not surface-level self-care. It's deep emotional excavation. It's the kind of healing that doesn't just soothe, it transforms. Thank you so much for your watching. See you soon.